Hi, viewers. Welcome again to another episode of the Yet Unnamed video blog, the video cast between Eric Wex and James Floyd Kelly. As you can tell, we just decided to keep on going. So this episode number 2 is we're just going to take off right where we left off with episode 1. And Eric, one of the things that we discussed was you had made this infographic that talks about the traditional versus non-traditional publishing methods. So let's get right into it. I know you're going to provide a link for viewers to go find that. You said it's on your website. But tell us about this infographic. If a viewer or a reader is looking at it and trying to make sense of it, what do you want them to take away from it?
Well, what I wanted to look at is where does publishing actually stand today for both writers and readers. And I think that writers are making decisions about how they publish their work. They have to make a decision now because they didn't have to make a decision in the past. In the past, there was only one way to publish, and now there are multiple means of getting your work in front of audiences, and so writers have to make a decision about how they do that. In the same fashion, readers end up having to make a decision about who do I read and how do I find good material to read? How do I find good fiction and avoid bad fiction? And I'm not going to say that in the past they didn't have to make that decision. We all know that there are plenty of bad books that make it through the traditional publishing system. But I think that it's still a gatekeeper of some sorts, and it still gives the readers a feeling that someone has vetted that this book is worth my time before they actually plunk down serious money on it. And I think that's an important point, that now they're plunking down money without necessarily knowing, particularly on a self-published author, whether or not that author is worth their time.
Now, viewers need to understand that when we say traditional versus non-traditional, there is that one in the middle. I call it, from when I was an English major, we used to learn about the vanity presses. Basically, you write a book, you give a publisher $5,000 or $10,000, they give you 2,000 copies of your book, and then you go sell the book, and if you don't sell them, you've got them sitting in your closet. That's used to be called the non-traditional publishing method.
Right.
But even today, that method is sort of like gone away because Amazon just says, hey, it's digital, give it to me, and we'll sell it. And if somebody wants a print copy, we'll print it out. If not, it just sits on our servers and takes up bits and bytes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That vanity press model is why self-publishing has the stigma to this day that it does. I mean, if you think about it, it's a bit weird. I mean, indie music. Right? Indie music is so cool that Apple went out and created a publishing platform for indie musicians called iTunes, where they could publish directly to the public and avoid going through a record label, and by doing so, radically change the music industry. Amazon has when they created the Kindle, and when they did what they are doing to publishing, right? And the publishers are whining and screaming about it really loudly. They're just imitating Apple's model with music. The difference is, and the reason Apple, I've always kind of scratched my head. In fact, I wrote on GeekData at one point that I kind of scratched my head why Apple didn't get it, why they allowed Amazon to come in and change publishing, where they were so accepting of indie musicians, and it's because of that vanity press stigma, right? That vanity press model was not a good model, right? Really.
Well, Apple did try to get it back. They came out with, what is it?
Yeah, kind of, by colluding with the publishers to artificially inflate prices, which they all fessed up to. Yeah, that was a mess, right? They tried to get into the e-publishing, but without the indie authors, right? They tried to go do it without the indie authors. And now they're kind of playing with us, but not really. They don't really offer us a good platform.
So it sounds like what you're saying, and I already know the answer to this. It sounds like what you're saying is that for right now, viewers watching us who are looking at, I want to write a fiction story, and do I go traditional versus non-traditional? It sounds like what you're saying is Amazon's really the best game in town.
Yes, and I would encourage you to remember that the New York Times is very closely tied in with the big 5 publishers. So the press that you're hearing about how evil Amazon is, I think that's really overblown. Now, am I comfortable with the fact that we have really one publishing platform if we want to go indie? No. Do I want a large corporation being the sole means of providing my income? No, I don't. I would really like Apple or Google or somebody else to compete effectively with Amazon, but none of them do. And until that happens, Amazon for the self-published author is the only game in town, and they're a great game, which you really get into in the infographic is how well Amazon treats its indie authors. Treats them fantastically compared to the traditional publishers. So a major reason that a lot of us choose not to go with the traditional publishers is that they don't treat their authors well at all. The contracts have very negative clauses. The biggest one being, I don't own my creative work anymore, right? I sell my creative work, and I give up my ownership and copyright rights to that work when I go with a traditional publisher. On Amazon, they're just a distributor, and I get to keep the ownership rights, which is a sea change for an author. To get very specific about the biggest advantage that provides to an author is if you look at Wool by Hugh Howey, which led him to fame, that story didn't take off for 9 months on Amazon. It sat there selling no copies, and then for unknown reasons, without any intervention on Hugh Howey's part, Wool took off, and he was able to respond instantly to his audience's demands and publish 4 more stories that became the novel Wool, and that's how it went. A traditional publisher can't move that fast, and a traditional publisher is not marketing your book 9 months after it's published unless it's already a mega hit.
Yeah, you know, I cannot remember how I got wind of Wool, but I do know that I did read Wool prior to the sequels. I guess that's what you'd call them, the follow-up books. So I was familiar with Wool, and you know, being in the geek circles, it may have been you or someone else that recommended it to me, but I read it before Hugh hit big, and it was really interesting for me to see all of a sudden, not only was there Wool, but boom, he released these the omnibus, I guess it was called, and all of a sudden he was popular, and he's done very well, and it just goes to show that it can happen to anybody. You've got to have a good story, obviously, and you got to have some marketing chops, because he has done very well in those regards. Word of mouth can only get you so far. It will get you far.
Yeah, Hugh knew how to take advantage of the opportunity he was presented, and that's what I would say is that Hugh's great skill was seeing the opportunities and taking advantage of them.
In a later video, we'll talk about the Amazon publishing process, but not today. What I want to hit you with right now is this question. You know, we're talking about the Amazon publishing model, and we're talking about Hugh Howey, who has a hit. You know, if I'm just reader X and I go to Amazon, I have a Kindle, and I'm looking for something new to read. You know, one of the things I'm constantly looking at as a nonfiction writer is, you know, how do I get people to know my book's out there? If I go to Amazon and I'm looking for a new fiction book, let's say I'm into horror, you know, Stephen King, Clive Barker, names I know, but here's John Smith, and he's got a novel that's got, you know, no stars because it just got published, but it's 99 cents or $2.99 or $3.99. You know, how are readers, you know, what do you have to say to viewers about this search process of finding a book that's of sufficient quality and interest that it's going to woo a reader over? Away from a traditional.
I'm so glad you asked that question in the way you're asking it, because I think, first of all, to talk to our writer audience, writers have to think like readers at this point. You have to think like a reader. And you also have to understand your game is 1 in 5 million or 6 million or 7 million. I don't know how many books are on Amazon at this point, but you are looking for someone to choose your particular title. And that is it's a lottery. I mean, your odds are the equivalent of a lottery, right? And so you have to buy as many tickets to that lottery as you can. And so while we're going to talk about it from the reader point of view, I want our writers to be paying attention to hear the things they need to do in order to actually get where they need to go. So one of the first things that a reader can do is they can look for writers who take the time to put professional art on their covers and are willing to invest, because that's expensive. So the reason you see a lot of titles on Amazon with bad art and bad covers is that the author is rightfully scared that they're not going to recoup their investment on the art. they're afraid that they're going to lose money on it because that cover costs anywhere between $50 at the cheapest, a good professional cover, and most, like, if you really want to stand out, you're putting $200 to $300 or $400 or $500. So for a young author who has no reputation, to put out $500 is a pretty big stamp that I have trust that my work is going to go somewhere. So look for the people who are willing to take that leap. Right, that's one thing. The second thing is,
in that sense, you are judging a book by its cover.
Absolutely, and there is no other way, right? You can't with a book, you can't consume the book before you consume it, right? Like you can't really read it. There is, however, the second thing I would do is read the preview, right? Amazon, whether it's paperback or Kindle, they will offer you a significant preview of the work.
First 30 pages or something like that.
Yeah, read it.
Do you decide that? When you
no, and you can go back to them and say, hey, I don't like what you chose. Make it longer, or make it shorter. You can do that, and some authors, particularly with short stories, have had problems with the whole thing or almost the whole thing appearing in the preview. But it's really important for a reader if they're trying to test out a writer. If the writer can't hook you in the first few pages, no apologies. Just move on. Right, and even Etna, right? You are going to read that book, and you're going to say, I either love characters and world building, because there's not much plot happening in the first book. I fixed that in the upcoming book, On the Far Bank of the Rubicon, that I'm publishing. There's a big bang at the beginning, but that book, if you don't like world building, you're not going to get past the first 4 chapters. So different books for different readers, and one of the best ways to figure out is, even if it's highly rated, read the first few pages and find out whether that author actually hooks you. Because, just because it's got a lot of good ratings doesn't mean that it's going to actually hook you. But the ratings do matter, right? The ratings will tell you if it's poorly edited, right? And I always go and I read the good reviews and I read bad reviews. I always pick 1 or 2 bad reviews and try to find the intelligent bad review. Most of them kind of aren't intelligent. A lot of them are just bitter, angry people. No, but you can find a bad review that matters.
Yeah, right? Now I will admit, when I'm buying a book, I will look and see how many 5 stars, how many 1 stars.
Yeah.
If there's a sufficiently small number of 1 stars, I'll go read them. Because 1 or 2 you can read very quickly. If there's a lot of 1 stars, you kind of know.
You get the idea. But even if there's a lot of 1 stars, maybe they're all complaining about
sometimes they complain about something outside of the books.
Something that doesn't matter to you. You may not be a person where Yeah, you may not be a person where copy edits matter to you, right?
I saw one book dinged because it had a whole lot of 1 stars, and they had dinged it because Amazon had made the book free like 2 weeks after it came out or something. People had paid $3.99 for it, and then and this was early in the Kindle days. And they came back and they slammed this poor author because it was out of his control. Amazon chooses certain books and says, hey, we're going to give it away free. And
actually, it would be the author. I would correct that. It's the author that decided 2 weeks after it came out it didn't sell enough, so they decided to make it free.
So in a sense, I guess that would be a legitimate gripe. But the thing about that bothers me
though,
on Amazon, they're not reviewing the story; they're reviewing the business model.
Right. I mean, you spent a cup of coffee on the book. This is the thing that's interesting to me, right? Like, you spent $4, 1 Starbucks on the book, and you're going to complain that somebody else got it for 99 cents or free. Right? It did not break your bank.
Well, as a nonfiction writer, one of my editors told me years ago when I first started out, he goes, listen, 100 people will read your book and they'll love it, and not one of them will go write a 5-star review. But one person will buy it and hate it, and he'll take the time to go and write that negative review. People will really go out of their way to write a negative review more than they will a positive review. It's unfortunate. That's just the world we live in the publishing world.
And I think as a writer, you have to learn to take the good out of the bad reviews and not take them personally.
I stopped reading them.
Did you?
Oh, yeah. Years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I've written about 30 books. I think at about book 10 or 11,
right.
I finally put my hands in the air and said, you know what, I can't keep doing this, because a lot of times the complaints were not what I would call valid.
I agree.
But my wife reads them. So she'll sometimes say, hey, you got a good review. And of course, then I go and peek. But as a rule, I'm like you. I just sort of just said, you know what? I'd rather be writing than worrying about the review. So, well, let me tell you this: we're almost out of time, so let's set up a teaser for the next video.
Yep.
We want viewers to go and check out your infographic.
Yep.
And hopefully they'll send in some questions. And I'm not against taking a side street and going that direction for a future video. But I think next time I'd like to open up a question to you, maybe if you're interested about your writing process. How do you go from A to Z? And A to Z is story idea to Amazon selling it. Let's just, and it's that may be more than 15 minutes worth, but we'll try.
That's 3 or 4. That's 3 or 4. That's 3 or 4 conversations. But yeah, to start with the writing process and how to plot a novel, that's a great thing. I am actually just beginning to teach a class for the local library system on novel plotting, and we'll talk about 3 or 4 different methods for novel plotting and how to actually get ideas. Enough ideas on paper that you feel comfortable actually trying to draft a novel, and like you're not swimming. And there's some writers who won't go that direction, but you should know up front that I am more someone who likes to outline a lot first than I am someone who writes than what's called a discovery writer, right? Someone who likes to discover stuff along the way. So, yeah.
Well, let's do this. Let's throw it out to the viewer and say, listen, we're going to try to keep these talks at 15 minutes. But I do worry that we might be cutting off our discussions just when viewers are going, no, I want to know more. So let's throw it to the viewers and say, hey, listen, we want to try to keep these to 15 minutes. But if you want some longer discussions, let us know. We certainly don't want to bore viewers, and we don't want to go on and on for an hour, at a time. But if 20 minutes or 30 minutes,
right?
Maybe if that's what viewers want. But if they like these short and fast discussions, all you need to know, viewers, is that Eric and I are committed. We're going to keep doing these. So send in your questions. We'll pitch them to Eric. And if you want these to be longer, let us know. But if you like this short and sweet, just understand that your question we may not get to your question for a few more videos out there. But Eric, good. I'm glad we got to do another one. I'm with you that I think this is stuff that people want to know. I want to know, and I know that I'm just getting started with the fiction writing, so I know there's a lot of people that are further along out there. So ignore me and just recognize that in future discussions, we want to talk about further along. I mean, I may not be there, but we got viewers who may. And so, I told you from the beginning that one of my things with this video, and you have your kind of what you want from it, but one of the things I wanted from it was I want to know how you got where you are, because I tend to follow in successful people's footsteps. I watch what they do, and I want to do it. So let's keep that in mind for future videos, that we want to make sure you share your progress and make sure
we'll do that.
And some good instruction. So, hey, listen, it's let's see, what's today? Tuesday? No,
it is Tuesday.
I'm out of it. Today's Tuesday. Have a great afternoon, and
you too.
And we'll do this again in a week. And viewers, thank you for joining us. And again, pitch some questions to Eric if you've got them, and we'll try to tackle them at a later video. Thanks for joining us. I'm James Floyd Kelly.
And I'm Eric Wex.
Appreciate your time. Take care. Take care, Eric.
Take care.
Bye-bye.